What's going on, everybody? I'm back. It's been a little while since my last video. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere, obviously. Work's just been super busy, so haven't had a ton of time or, to be honest, inspiration or motivation to get any videos done, but that's changing today. We're in the last month of summer, and then we're into fall, which is my favorite time of year, so expect a lot more videos as the days and weeks go forward. So with that out of the way, I want to just take this chance to make this video to talk about something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's only been growing in relevancy as the days go by, as more and more announcements go by, and that is the conundrum of whether to buy a movie on 4K or not. So before I get into it, just a quick history on my collecting habits and how I got started out. So I've always loved movies like my whole life. I always had VHS tapes and DVDs growing up. But it wasn't until 2018 that I really started to amp up my collection and, start to cultivate the collection that I have now. At that time, I'm pretty sure 4K was relatively new in 2018. I want to say the first 4K disc came out in like 2016 or 2017. So at that point, I didn't have a 4K player, I only had a Blu-ray player, so I was only buying Blu-rays. And I think because of the time that I got in, I was kind of honestly in the worst possible position that I'm in right now, facing all these 4K conundrums, because at the time, my instant, when you first start out collecting, your first priority is to kind of just collect all your favorite movies, right? Sounds obvious. So you've got like huge, check marks that you need to cross off, all the heavy hitters. And within a couple years, I had kind of amassed all of those, and now I'm especially, in 2023, I'm at a point where I own all my favorite movies. Barring new stuff that's coming out, I pretty much own all my favorite stuff. So once you find yourself in that position, you kind of have to make the distinction of whether to upgrade these things or not. I do want to say that this is just me, right? Everyone's collection situation is different, budget, space, all that stuff. This is not an indictment on people who collect everything in 4K, nothing like that. This is just strictly how I approach it, so I know that should probably go without saying, but just want to throw it in there. So for me, there's a couple factors that I think about when making the decision, right? First and foremost, is this an all-time classic? Is this a favorite of mine specifically? Would this make my top 10 movies? With that being in mind, I already own a lot of those in 4K already. So that kind of doesn't really bear in mind a lot when I'm making decisions about what to purchase, because I've already had to make that decision. Second, something that I think about is how long ago did I buy this Blu-ray? If this was one of the very first Blu-rays that I ever bought, then I'm more likely to want to upgrade it, because it's been so long since I've since I've had to spend money on this movie. And for some reason, maybe it doesn't make a ton of sense, but in my mind, the more time between the initial purchase, the more likely I can justify, oh, it's probably time to, pull the trigger on that one. I don't know if anybody else does that, but it's something that I, kind of bear in mind when making these decisions. And then the obvious one kind of is like, is this a movie that's gonna look better in 4K? And in my opinion, a lot of them do not need to be upgraded. They just don't. Certain movies that pop into your mind immediately, movies like Suspiria, Blade Runner, movies like that are hitting on multiple ends of the color spectrum. They have like a gradient to them. They're very visually appealing. There's a lot of stuff happening, a lot of colors. That is something that is an easy, okay, obviously that would look great in 4K with HDR and Dolby Vision. Not every movie fits that criteria, and we're going to talk about some of those here in just a second. So kind of with that out of the way, that's just sort of how I approach these things. And so now I'm going to talk about 5 movies that I did upgrade on 4K and 5 movies that I will not or do not plan on upgrading to 4K. So here we go. All right, so we'll start off with the ones that I do not plan to ever upgrade to 4K. First one's Candyman. Now, this is a great horror movie. My favorite horror movie of the entire 90s, probably. Yes, over Scream. I like this movie more. That being said, this movie doesn't have a ton of color range to it, and I don't really think of it as being sort of a visual spectacle, right? So for me, when this was announced on 4K, it was an easy pass. I already have it. And the thing that you also have to consider too, that I forgot to mention, is some of these Blu-rays that already exist are already really good. There's gonna be times when, you know, you're upgrading a movie that was one of the first Blu-rays ever released from like 2008 or something. So there's a much larger gap quality-wise. But with something like this already looks so good. This is already a Scream Factory Blu-ray. They do a great job. There's just no need to upgrade this. There's just not, in my opinion. This one might be controversial, but another horror film, The Exorcist. The color palette in The Exorcist is pretty dull, aside from like some lime green in there. It's a pretty dull kind of movie. You know, it's kind of shot famously like a documentary. It's very suburban. It's not a ton of, you know, there's not a lot of pops. You know, it doesn't pop really. Again, this is not to say this isn't a great movie, because obviously it is. But this Blu-ray is good for me. I don't need a 4K of this. And I know a ton of people are excited about this 4K coming out in October, and that's awesome. I wish I was more excited about it too. Matter of fact, I wish I didn't own this yet, because I would love to buy that newer copy with the better artwork and stuff. But the problem is I already own this because I like this movie so much that it was one of the first Blu-rays I ever bought. And so as a result, I have it, and I can't justify, you know, buying the new one when I already have this. You know, usually that process, you know, entails me listing this on eBay and having to sell it and ship it. And I would honestly just rather hang on to this than shell out the money and spend that money that I would have spent on something that I want a lot more. You know, that's just kind of where I'm at with my collecting. Again, this is not meant to be sort of an indictment on the people who do collect that way. I would like to if I could, but I don't have the space or the money to do that. So that's just kind of the way it is. Here's another one, and I feel like I'm not going to get a lot of flack for this, but Wayne's World. Typically speaking, comedy really doesn't need 4K. 4K honestly is, you know, it benefits some genres more than others, I think I can say. There will be obvious exceptions, but for the most part, I feel pretty confident making that blanket statement. There's some color to this movie for sure, and again, that's not the only criteria, is just color, but you know, it's a big one for me. And honestly, Wayne's World is just not a movie that I think really needed a 4K or benefits a ton from a 4K. So not a ton to say about it. Again, I love Wayne's World. I wouldn't own it if I didn't love it, but I don't love it that much. In keeping with that, National Lampoon's Vacation. You know, same kind of principles apply here. And another criteria that I forgot to mention is just how frequently do you find yourself rewatching that movie? You know, I have movies that I've bought and haven't even ever watched. And I think about that and I'm like, oh, they're announcing a 4K now of that movie that I bought and never watched. So I'm definitely not buying that 4K because I haven't watched this movie the entire time I've owned it. And that's not to say I don't like the movie or that I regret buying it, but sometimes you're just not in the mood to watch a certain movie, and you know, these things happen. With this, I've probably watched this once, and it's not to say I don't like it, but it doesn't come up a ton when I'm trying to think of what to watch, so Vacation, that's an easy skip for me. So the last one that I am not planning on upgrading, this was just announced today at the time of recording this, but it's The Mist. This went on sale on Amazon, and it was really cheap, and I pulled the trigger on it because I wanted to own it. And that made some online speculate that because it was discounted so heavily that a 4K was probably on the way. And I should have taken that as a warning sign, but of course I didn't, because, you know, ultimately as well, I don't really care that much at the end of the day, you know? Obviously it would be nice, but like, you know, I'm not gonna sit here speculating on which Blu-rays to buy on the off chance that they get upgraded to 4K. It's just not how I get down, so. Yeah, this is a great movie. This would honestly probably benefit from a 4K. Especially the black and white version, because black and white can really look really great on 4K, and I'm assuming that the black and white version will be included in the 4K because it's a 4-disc set. So, this is probably the one I'm most skeptical or flexible on, I should say. There is a chance I could see myself buying the 4K of this at some point down the road if it's discounted heavily enough, Christmas gift, something like that. But I'm good with this Blu-ray. If I never do, it's fine, because, you know, it's good. It's good. So those were 5 movies that I do not plan to upgrade, and these are our 5 movies that I did upgrade, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why I decided to. So Highlander was one I got from like a Facebook marketplace for like $4, right? So already I'm into this movie for like $4. So already that's a factor. Then this is a movie that I've loved like my whole life. Watched this when I was super young. I don't know why, but always loved Highlander. So when it was announced on 4K, it was an easy purchase for me. It was super cheap too. I think this was like $12.99 on Amazon, and then you could price match at Best Buy on release day, which is super cheap. The movie has a lot of different locales. It's featured in a lot of different countries, past and present. There's lots of lightning bolts, you know, super badass, like 80s neon type of stuff. So yeah, Highlander was an easy upgrade all day long. Speaking of easy upgrades, we got Creepshow. This is the standard bare bones Warner Brothers Blu-ray. I bought this very early on in my collecting days before I knew what Scream Factory was, or boutique labels for that matter. So this was an easy upgrade to the 4K of Creepshow from Scream Factory. But then again, had I had the Scream Factory, you know, hard case release of this, I may not have bought this. But because there was so much time between these releases and such a jump in picture quality, Creepshow's an amazing movie with lots of reds and blues and, you know, a lot of practical effects that benefit from 4K. So again, easy 4K upgrade all day. Then you got the Blu-ray of Pulp Fiction. I don't remember where I got this, but I don't remember it being very expensive. And then you have the 4K Steelbook, which was, you know, I'm not someone who cares a ton about packaging, but this was an instance where I said, okay, the 4K between the picture quality and this awesome Steelbook was something that I should definitely probably upgrade over this standard blue. And a lot of the time, I'll even try to get rid of these, but between either donating them to Goodwill or having like a yard sale or selling them on eBay. But I've hung on to this one, and yeah, it's Pulp Fiction. I mean, why wouldn't I upgrade this? Amityville Horror is the next one. This is not a movie I love, but this was a pretty cheap, I believe this was like a Dollar General pickup, something like that. And then I got the Amityville 4K from Vinegar Syndrome. This was an instance of me finding something in person and saying, oh, that's really nice, I want that. And not really thinking about it too much beyond that. Sometimes I do that. I find that can be a pretty dangerous way of thinking, so I don't do it a ton. It's more of like a treat yourself thing. But that's just another factor. You know, sometimes when something's right in front of you and you could have the instant gratification of taking it home versus having to go online and put in your credit card information and, you know, press buy, it's a little bit different, you know. So I'm trying to touch on a lot of different factors because I feel like they're all pretty important. So this is an instance of that. Then you got one of my favorites from 2019, The Lighthouse. Already a pretty awesome, like, bare bones release from Lionsgate and A24. You know, you got the Blu-ray banners black up top, all black and white, slipcover. If there had never been a 4K of this, I'd have been fine with that, but obviously there would be because it's a very popular film. And then I opted to get the 4K from Arrow Video. I mean, just look at this art. I mean, this is insane. Again, I'm not someone who cares a ton about packaging. It's not enough to get me to make a purchase most of the time. There has to be other factors as well. But between already loving this movie and then having one of the big box Arrow sets, this was a slam dunk home run. So that's it, guys. That's 5 movies that I did upgrade and 5 movies that I did not upgrade. I feel like it's a really nuanced conversation, and I think that there's a lot to be gained from thinking about it critically. You know, I'm not saying that people don't do that, but I think it's something that's good to talk about and think about all the different reasons why we buy what we buy. So definitely leave some comments in the comments section to talk about your criteria, how you decide to do this stuff.